Okay. Welcome and thank you for joining us on behalf of Holocaust Museum, LA. My name is Claudia Marquez, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's program. For those of you who may be joining us for the first time, Holocaust Museum LA is the first museum founded by Holocaust survivors in the United States, established in 1961. Survivors came together to create a living memorial to honor their loved ones who perished in the Holocaust. Since its founding, the museum has been guided by a clear mission to commemorate, educate, and inspire future generations. In just a moment, we will have the honor and privilege of hearing from Kendra Fuchs, who will share a family and personal connection to this history. Afterward, we will have the time for a few questions, and you may do so by submitting them in the Q&A box on the bottom of your screen, or if you feel more comfortable, you can use your chat as well, and we will answer as many as possible. Now, without further ado, please welcome Kendra Fuchs.
Good morning, everybody. Here we go. What if the man who outwitted the Nazis with multiple fake IDs, dodged the Nazi secret police, and smuggled dozens of people to freedom was your grandfather? Hi, I'm Kendra Fuchs. I'm a mom of four and a proud Los Angeles native, and I'm honored to be part of the Descendants of Remembrance Project, a speaker group through the Holocaust Museum of Los Angeles. This museum was started by Holocaust survivors who came to Los Angeles and wanted to make sure that their stories and the memory of those who were lost were never forgotten. Today, that mission continues through the voices of their children, grandchildren, and even their great-grandchildren. I joined this program after something unexpected happened. Last year, I posted a short clip of my grandmother's Holocaust story to my Instagram. It went viral, but not in the way that I had hoped. The anti-Semitism and the hate in the comments was overwhelming. But instead of going silent, I realized that I needed to speak louder and to tell my grandfather's story, which has never really been shared publicly before. I realized that if we stop telling these stories, we risk forgetting them. And forgetting is what allows history to repeat itself. You've all probably heard of Anne Frank or the French Resistance, but fewer people know about the Dutch Resistance. Ordinary people like you and me who risked everything to fight back. One of those people was my grandfather, Bernard Granada. He didn't win medals, he was not famous, but he had courage and chutzpah, which is a Jewish word that means boldness, nerve, confidence with guts. And he had a story that deserves to be heard. Honestly, I believe that it would make an incredible movie. And today, I am honored to tell it to you all and share it with you today. Bernard Granada, who I call Papa, was born in Amsterdam in 1919 into a close-knit Jewish family. He was the youngest of three kids. His siblings were Joseph, Mary Ann, and his parents were Alexander and Regina. From the start, Bernard had what you might call that main character energy. He was mischievous, he was bold, a natural showman, traits that would carry him through the war and shape the rest of his life. Bernard was always up to something. One Yom Kippur, which is the holiest day on the Jewish calendar for Jewish people, we pray, we fast, and we ask God for forgiveness so we can start our Jewish New Year with a clean slate. Bernard decided that he wanted to climb a very large chestnut tree that was outside of the synagogue that his parents were praying in and fill his pockets with chestnuts. Some of the congregants saw what he was up to and ran inside to get his father, who happened to be leading the services. He had to stop everything and climb up and get Bernard out of the tree. Another time, Bernard and his friend were playing with a ball and chasing it across the rooftops, and he fell straight through a neighbor's skylight. Thankfully, he walked away with not a scratch. The skylight, however, was not so lucky. Then there was the time he and his cousin ran away from home to try to join the French Foreign Legion, which was like an elite military squad in France that took volunteers from just about anywhere with no questions asked. If you were brave or desperate, you could join and get a fresh start. Spoiler alert, that didn't work out either. Bernard was clever, fearless, and full of chutzpah, that funny word again, which means he had guts and boldness and charisma all rolled into one. Bernard also loved music. He sang in talent shows and he taught himself to play the guitar. That guitar would later become a powerful prop, helping him pass as a harmless traveling musician while smuggling people out of Nazi-occupied territory. Like many young men of his time, Bernard joined the Dutch army at age 18. He was Dutch first and he was Jewish second. He became a motorcycle courier, carrying messages between units near the German border. It was dangerous work that required speed, guts, and sharp instincts. That is also when he became known as the Red Danger for zipping around on his bright red Indian motorcycle. He didn't just ride, he learned to fix, flip, and trade bikes, always upgrading. He actually made a lot of money doing this, and his motorcycle became his trademark that would later help him move quickly, quietly, and often unnoticed during his resistance work. Before World War II, the Netherlands was home to one of the largest Jewish communities in Western Europe. Many Jews, like Bernard's ancestors, had settled there after being expelled from Spain during the Spanish Inquisition in the 1400s. In fact, our family name was originally Granada, like the city in Spain. Granada, we have an extra A, is the Dutch version. There's two A's at the end. Jews were integrated into Dutch society and were teachers, tailors, doctors, and artists, but anti-Semitism always lurked under the surface. And when the Nazis invaded in May 1940s, things changed very quickly. Germany took over the Netherlands in just 5 days. Bernard was serving in the Dutch army near the German border when the invasion began. He and another Jewish soldier ditched their uniforms, grabbed civilian clothing from a farmer, and made their way back home, biking, walking, and even attempting to steal a truck. Again, he always said, I was a Dutchman first and a Jew second. Back in Amsterdam, life under Nazi rule got worse by the week. Jews were forced to register with the authorities. They were banned from parks, from schools, from theaters, from public transportation. They were slowly erased from public life. Then came the Yellow Star. Jews were required to sew the Star of David onto their clothing, and they even had to pay for it themselves. It cost 4 guilders, which is about 35 US dollars today. Bernard wore his star for 3 whole days. Then he ripped it off, and he never wore it again. It was an incredibly dangerous decision, but Bernard refused to be labeled, and that willingness to take risks led to him to what came next. By 1941, all citizens were required to carry ID cards. Jewish cards were stamped with a large black J. Bernard went to get his, knowing his family had already been identified, but it quickly became too dangerous to carry. So he began building new identities, fake IDs, new names, and the one that he used the most was Matthew Lunenburg. Occupation, musician. His girlfriend at the time, Lady, filled out the form so that the handwriting wouldn't match his. He even trained himself not to respond to his real name in public. Around this time, Bernard began quietly smuggling couples out of the country, people who had come to his father, a very well-respected figure in the Jewish community, desperate for help. His father would send them to Bernard. Bernard would forge their documents and guide them on foot through the woods and farmland into Belgium. Most Jews at the time were still trying to cooperate and avoid trouble, trusting leaders who believed compliance might keep them safe. Joining the resistance was rare and incredibly dangerous. Jews were already being hunted for who they were, and anyone who actively resisted risked imprisonment, torture, or death. Bernard chose a different path. He went underground and he fought back. At the same time, he could see the masks slipping. With each new restriction, with each banned profession, stamped ID, yellow stars, things kept getting worse. And yet he would say, if this is the worst that happens, it's not so bad. But it kept getting worse. When deportations to so-called labor camps began, Bernard knew he had to find a way to avoid being rounded up. His older brother, Joseph, who was studying to be a doctor, came up with a plan. Let's fake a bleeding ulcer. And he coached Bernard step by step. Bernard was told to swallow a small piece of foil before an x-ray so it would appear as a shadow. He also had to make it look like he was bleeding internally. Right before the doctor inserted the stomach tube, he needed to swallow fresh blood. Joseph told him to prick his finger with a hidden pin and swallow a few drops. And just to be safe, their mother, who had always kept a strictly kosher home, that's a way of eating, did something that she would never have done under normal circumstances. She bought non-kosher blood sausage. In Jewish dietary law, eating blood is strictly forbidden, but desperate times called for desperate measures. She wanted Bernard to have traces of old blood in his system, just enough to make the test believable. Bernard hated every bite, but he ate it. And on the day of the exam, he forgot the pin. In a panic, he grabbed a metal nail file that he just happened to have in his pocket, and he jabbed his finger until it bled. He swallowed the blood, and just as the doctor returned, and it worked. The doctor believed him. Bernard received a medical certificate stating he had a bleeding ulcer, an official exemption from forced labor. He never ended up using it. But that forged diagnosis may have saved his life, and that is when he truly went underground. In late 1941, Bernard joined the Dutch resistance group called Het Parool, the Word or the Promise. They printed underground newspapers, forged documents, and smuggled Jews to safety. The Het Parool is actually still an active newspaper in Holland today. Bernard helped dozens of people escape across the Dutch-Belgian border, a route that he already knew well. His sister, Marianne, had married and moved to Belgium a couple of years earlier, and he used to visit her by slipping through the woods, ditches, and past the border patrols. What started as a family visit route became a lifeline. He memorized the terrain, patrol schedules, the safe houses. Every crossing was dangerous, but he knew exactly where to hide and when to move. He operated under multiple aliases to stay ahead of capture. Matthew Lunenburg, the one that he used the most in Holland, Bert Govaerts in Belgium, Bertrand Griswold in France. Each name, each ID was a layer of protection, part of this web that he built himself to keep himself and others alive. And he used his guitar as a prop, posing as a harmless traveling musician, an identity that gave him cover to move through cities and borders and train stations without raising suspicion. Every time Bernard returned to Amsterdam, he begged his parents to flee, but they refused. Then one day, everything changed. They were rounded up and brought to a big theater called the Hollandische Schouwburg, a former theater that Bernard had loved as a child and now had turned into a Nazi detention center for Jews. A family friend helped sneak them out a side door into a nearby children's home, and Bernard picked them up. This time, his father said what Bernard had been waiting to hear: "We're coming with you." He forged their ID cards, he arranged disguises, and he prepared them for the journey. Bernard's mother, who couldn't bring a suitcase, so she layered herself in 3 full outfits, including all of her underclothes, and she could barely move. His father, worried that the Nazis would notice his nose, let Bernard's actress friend apply makeup to change his appearance, despite hating the way it felt. They waited in a cafe until nightfall, and then they crawled through barbed wire at the border, but the escape wasn't smooth. While crossing a narrow wooden plank over a ditch, Bernard's mother slipped and fell into the water. Weighed down by her wet layers of clothing, she was terrified. Bernard pulled her out and brought her back to dry off by the fire. By the morning, her clothes were still damp, and when she sat on the transeat the next day, it soaked through the cushion, but there was no turning back. Eventually, they reached Brussels, but the danger was not over. A few days later, Bernard got word that the Gestapo had found out where his parents were hiding. He rushed to get them out with just 10 minutes to spare. He found them a new safe house where they ended up staying for the rest of the war. Bernard stayed close to Belgium because that's where his parents were now in hiding. He couldn't risk going far, but he also could not sit still. Resistance work was part of who he had become. In Brussels, his side gig turned into a cover story. A friend's father overheard him playing the guitar and invited him to record a song. That led to local nightclub gigs, and soon Bernard was performing professionally. His guitar case became more than camouflage. It was his ticket to move around freely while carrying secret messages and documents, and sometimes even ID cards. Through the entertainment world, Bernard met Charlotte, a Belgian actress who had refused to perform under Nazi control. She was active in the Front de l'Independence, the FI, the Belgian resistance. She smuggled documents, he smuggled people, and together they became a team, supporting each other, sharing danger, and falling in love. But even in showbiz, danger found him. During a Nazi razzia, which is a raid, Bernard barely escaped being shipped off to Germany. He leapt off a moving tram, ducked into a department store just in time. And then came the moment he never forgot. One day, Bernard was stopped at random by a German officer and marched into a government building without an explanation. The officer ordered him to his knees and aimed a pistol at his head. As Bernard braced for the worst, another officer across the room called out to the one with the gun. He motioned for him to come over, and the officer lowered the pistol and walked away to join the other two in a heated discussion. Gesturing, arguing, completely distracted. Still kneeling, Bernard realized that his life was literally hanging by a thread. And inch by inch, he rose. No one looked. His heart was pounding, and he quietly walked to the door, and then out of the building, and he kept walking. And no one stopped him. He never found out why they let him go, but that moment never left him. For Bernard, Resistance wasn't always sabotage or shootouts. Sometimes it was a well-timed joke, a forged document, a quiet escape, and always a willingness to risk everything to do what was right. Bernard had even more close calls. Before he left Holland, a girlfriend's jealous Nazi coworker reported him. The SS, Nazi soldiers who worked for Hitler and helped him run the camps, raided the apartment and dragged him by his hair from a closet. They beat him and they marched him to a police station and planned to turn him over to the Gestapo, the Nazi secret police. Luckily, the Dutch officer on duty was one of his old army friends. He agreed to accidentally release him the next day at 6 a.m. Bernard barely made it out alive, and he couldn't walk without help. His father took him to the doctor, and Bernard went into hiding again. At one point, Bernard had hid in a quiet, crowded safe house in The Hague with 30 others, including his cousins from Rotterdam, named the Weinbergs. After just a few days, Bernard sensed that the location was unsafe. The tension, the foot traffic, the whispers, it did not feel right to him. He begged his cousins to leave with him, and they hesitated. We'll wait a bit longer. Bernard left. Shortly after, the house was raided by the Nazis, and all 30 people hiding inside, including his cousins, the Weinbergs, were arrested and deported to Sobibor, a Nazi extermination camp in occupied Poland. At Sobibor, there were no work selections, there were no barracks, there was no survival. It was simply an extermination camp designed solely for mass murder. Most prisoners were killed within hours of arrival. Bernard's cousins arrived, they were arrested on March 23rd, 1943, and they were murdered in Sobibor on April 9th, less than 3 weeks later. The safe house where they had been hiding was on Reichenstraat, a street known within resistance circles. Among those helping hide the Jews was a woman named Miep Waldheim, a courageous Dutch woman who, like the more widely known Miep Gies, who helped hide Anne Frank, risked everything again and again to save innocent lives during the Holocaust. By 1944, Bernard was living under the alias Bert Govarts, performing in nightclubs by night and working secretly in the underground by day. It was the perfect cover. He got paid, he could move freely between the cities, and best of all, it gave him a reason to carry around his guitar case, which often held more than just a guitar. Then came a surprising invitation, a spot in a German-sanctioned performance tour entertaining forced Belgian laborers, but it was inside Nazi Germany. Instead of saying no, Bernard consulted his resistant contacts. Could this be useful? He asked, and they said, oui, pour la bonne cause, which is yes, for the cause. British intelligence needed someone to confirm rumors of massive munitions dumps near Xanten in the German Rhineland. So Bernard agreed to go, this time as a spy. He was issued a new forged identity, Armand Jean de Sager, a cabaret artist, and joined the traveling troupe. He performed on a bombed-out factory floor while keeping his eyes peeled for these stockpiles. On the third day, he spotted it, a massive cache of munitions under camouflage netting. He memorized the exact layout, the surroundings, and got the intel back to the Allies. But on his way out of Germany, the real danger began. He did not have a passport. Without one, he risked being detained, interrogated, or worse. But Bernard wasn't short on nerves. He flirted with a young German woman, clerk at the city hall. He impressed her with his stage pass and his smooth talk, and he walked out the next morning with a Fremdenpass, an official-looking foreigner's passport stamped with a Nazi swastika. When he returned to Brussels, he presented the passport during a routine ID check by German soldiers. They didn't question him. They saluted. In Brussels, Bernard's next assignment did not come from an office or a meeting. It came from a street kiosk, not for cigarettes or newspapers, but for pilots. Through his underground contact, Bernard was tasked with smuggling 7 downed American airmen out of Nazi-occupied Belgium. Using the same hidden routes he once traveled as a musician, he escorted each one toward safety, eventually guiding them to the French-Spanish border. Every step was dangerous. At one point, a young pilot started nervously talking about where he crashed, what his mission was about, what he'd seen, and Bernard shut it down immediately. What you don't know, you can't reveal. That's survival tip number 1. But not everybody follows the rules. Enter Mr. N. He was a complete liability. He claimed that his forged ID had been taken by the SD, which was the Nazi secret police, Bernard didn't believe him for a minute. If they had actually taken his papers, they would not have let him walk away. Bernard suspected he had sold it on the black market. Still, Bernard got him new documents, and even then, Mr. N kept breaking every single rule. He talked to strangers on the train, he mingled with other refugees, and at one stop, he even played pool in a public bar. At that point, Bernard had had enough. He sent someone to drug his beer just to keep him quiet. Somehow, they made it to safety. Did Mr. N say thank you? Not even a glance. Bernard never lost a single person he was guiding, but this guy came dangerously close to being the first. Lesson learned: you do not have to be a hero, but for the love of all that's holy, listen. After the war ended, Bernard didn't expect any more danger, but he was arrested. He was mistaken for a Nazi collaborator. Bernard was picked up off the street by Belgian police and taken to St. Gilles prison in Brussels. He was not told why. He was not given a trial. He didn't have a lawyer. He couldn't make a phone call. He was held in a concrete cell with 9 other men for 9 months. Most of them were real collaborators. During the Battle of the Bulge, German guards at that prison began treating those prisoners like VIPs, assuming that they'd be liberated. Bernard, who made no secret of his resistance work, feared he'd be executed by mistake, right when the war was supposed to be over. Finally, in June 1945, Bernard was taken to the military office where a man looked at him and said, "Ugh, he resembles a man who checked IDs at the racetrack, but he's not the one. I'm sorry." That was it. 9 months in prison because he looked like someone else. His file had been lost. No one knew what to do with him. And just like that, he was released. And what did Bernard do next? He went right back to performing Red Cross galas, cabarets, entertaining soldiers and civilians, because that is who he was: resilient, bold, and impossible to keep down. After the war, Bernard was performing at a Red Cross gala in Brussels when Josephine Baker, who was one of the biggest stars in the world at the time — she was basically Beyonce of the 1940s — walked in. The crowd went wild. This wasn't just any celebrity. She was so famous. An international icon, a civil rights activist, a beloved star of the stage. The audience begged her to sing her signature hit, "I Have Two Loves." And when she did, she brought the house down. And Bernard, of course, he had to follow her. As she got up to leave, Bernard stepped up to the mic and said, "Madame Baker, would you do the honor of staying to hear my song?" And she smiled and said, "Certainly." He sang the song of the Russian army and he crushed it. Minutes later, her agents knocked on his dressing room door. "She wants to see you. Bring your guitar." He was offered a real contract, a spot on her international tour, a dream gig. But the next morning, 2 Belgian agents showed up at his door. "You must return to your country of origin." No explanation, no exceptions. Even Josephine Baker tried to intervene. It didn't matter. He had to go. He missed his moment. But Bernard, of course, he didn't give up. Thanks to connections from Het Parool, the underground group that he was a part of, he secured a passport in just 1 day. He raced back to Brussels, too late for the tour, but just in time for a new chapter. He auditioned for the USO, joined their performance circuit, and starred in a show called Rhapsody in Blue Surge, touring military bases and entertaining American troops across Europe. From spy missions to stage lights, Bernard never stopped showing up. After the war, Bernard moved to a city in Holland called Groningen — it's in the northern part of the Netherlands — to help rebuild a wholesale business owned by a family named Wallage. He was a natural at sales, of course. Charming, multilingual, and full of chutzpah. Remember that main character energy? And he quickly became one of the top representatives. That decision also changed his personal life. While he was working there, he met a fellow survivor named Rita von Stratum. She had survived the war in hiding, and in 1947, they got married and began building a new life together. In 1948, Bernard and Rita were cast in a Dutch film about the resistance. It told the true story of Zuster Duker, a man disguised as a nurse who led an underground group that was ultimately captured and tortured by the Gestapo. Bernard and Rita played supporting roles, and the film was shown across the Netherlands. It was a meaningful way for them to help preserve the story of what had happened. But the war may have been over, but Bernard's days of smuggling were not. One day, a friend asked him for his help. His wife's 70-year-old mother, Sophia, a Holocaust survivor, was stuck alone in Paris without identity papers. Bernard initially said no, smuggling was illegal now. It's risky, it's unnecessary. But after hearing her story, he couldn't say no. He flew to Paris, he picked her up, and he walked her across the border through the woods, retracing one of his old wartime routes in reverse. At one point, a Dutch border guard stopped them, and Bernard calmly explained who he was, what he had done during the war, and why this woman needed help. The guard looked at Sophia, frail and trembling, and said, "Go on, I never saw you." By the late 1950s, Bernard and Rita had two children, Yolanda, who's my mother, and Raymond, who's my uncle. Bernard had become one of the top international salesmen for a company called Hunter Douglas. They sell mini blinds and curtains. And in 1959, the family immigrated to the United States to help launch the company's American branch. They eventually settled in Riverside, California, and soon after, and soon after, Bernard and Rita co-founded a Jewish music group with fellow survivors called the Mishpacha, which means family in Yiddish. Bernard Granada was many things. He was a resistance fighter, a smuggler, a performer, a husband, a father, a grandfather, a survivor. But to me, he was just my grandfather. We still have his guitar that got him through the war, the same one he carried across borders, used it as a disguise, and played in cabarets to survive. That guitar is still in our family home today. We have his forged identity cards, his passports, his business cards, photos of him performing, his manuscript, and one of my favorites, a picture of me and my sister sitting at the table with our grandfather, just being himself, just being ours. And we still have his voice. There's a song he used to sing with the group that he was in, the Mishpacha, called Inshallah. It's a song about memory, loss, and hope. It reflects on the Holocaust and the 6 million Jews who were murdered, many of whom were never given proper graves, never properly mourned. The final lines of the song say, "Requiem for 6 million souls who do not have marble graves, yet from the sand their memory still grows." It's a reminder that even though so many lives were taken and so much was lost, that their memory did not disappear. It lives on in stories, in families, and in moments like this. He would end the song by saying, "God willing, God willing, God willing." So I'll end my presentation with that too. God willing, may we never see a world like that again, and may we always speak up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kendra, for sharing that incredible, unbelievable story. I mean, his resilience and his brave character just really, you really touched on everything very well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If anybody has any questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat. But in the meantime, I'm curious, Kendra, when did your grandfather start sharing these stories with you? And did he ever express any type of fear? I mean, he seemed like such a fearless man.
I never saw fear in him. I only had him for 13 years of my life, so I can't really say like, I wish that we had had him for longer, but he started sharing a story. He actually wrote a book. It hasn't been published, and that's where I took, because he passed away so long ago, that's where I took a lot of the information from for this presentation. So yeah, like he never got a chance. My grandmother, so what I talked about, my grandmother had given the Shoah Foundation testimony through the Spielberg Foundation, and she was able to tell her story. My grandfather never had that opportunity. I really wish he did. So he shared through his book and little bits and pieces. I remember he used to pull out his passports, his fake ID cards that were on the first part of my presentation. I don't know if anybody can still see my screen, but I can click it back. Did you lose me? Because I'm going
I
to end.
stopped sharing your screen, but you can share
Oh,
it
okay.
right back
You know, it's okay. It's okay. I'll go. Do you want me to share it?
if you'd like.
Okay. No, it's fine. It's fine. Anyways, the ID cards that he had forged, he used to take them out and he used to show us like, this, actually, I'm going to share my screen because I feel like I need to show you which one. Hold on a second. Let's see. Slideshow. Sorry, guys. Presenter view. Here we go. I don't know where we go. Can you see my screen or no?
Yes.
So it's this one where all these ID cards are. So he basically he used to pull them out and he used to show like this is where I like sat by the light of the window when people were banging on the door with a pen and like I don't know how I drew a lion. One of them has a lion in the corner and he literally drew the stamp of the lion in the corner on the picture, which is crazy. And he would tell us like he didn't know how he do that. But anyway, yeah, so
His fearless definitely helped him get through all that. It's
yes,
unbelievable.
yes.
Um, okay, I do we have one question in our chat so far. This is a really good question. What advice do you have for our class about fighting hatred and intolerance or intolerance? I'm sorry.
I mean, I always believe like, and I guess this comes from my grandparents is if you see something, say something, like stand up for the underdog. Don't just, go about your business. I feel like in this world that we live in today, it's so easy to just be stuck in our own worlds because everybody's always on their phones and they're just like, like we've kind of become more of a self-absorbed society that doesn't really pay attention to what's going on. If you see somebody getting bullied, open your mouth, like step up, say something. I think that that's really the point is don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to speak up because that's where people start stepping all over you. And that's, I think that that's even how the Nazis came to power was because people were afraid to say anything, to step up, to push back.
Thank you. I don't see any more questions, but I'll go with one last question before we do log. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so they're saying thank you for answering the question. I'm just gonna ask one last question before we do end the session here. Maybe we can motivate someone else to ask one after. Um, how did your grandparents or you know experience shape your family and how you grew up?
I mean, I guess they just talked about stuff. They talked about it. They talked about their survival. Obviously, there's a lot of baggage being the descendants of Holocaust children, survivor parents. My mother even talks about, I actually went to Holland this summer with my son to do a roots trip to retrace like all of the places where my grandfather was. I didn't get to everywhere. I didn't go to Belgium, but we went through my grandmother worked in a mental hospital before the Nazis came. So we went through and retraced the steps and like there's a lot of emotional trauma that comes with it. My mother told me after I came back, she's like, I don't know if I would have been able to be on that trip with you because it was so hard for her growing up. So like for my mom, it was really hard, but for me, I think it just taught me resilience and just you can do hard things. Like you can push through stuff that's hard because like what's the alternative? I don't know. That's how I look at my life. I've been through a lot of hard things in my life and it's really easy to give up and to just say, okay, I'm just going to lay in my bed and just like close my eyes and hope it passes. But like you have to fight through it. And that's what my grandmother did by running away when the Nazis came and she went into hiding. And my grandfather by, you know, smuggling, I think it was about 50 people that he ended up smuggling out of Holland. So just push through it, guys. Like life is hard. It's not going to be easy, and it would be amazing if everything was perfect for us and everything was so easy. But just push through because there's always going to be the silver lining, and there's always a plan. Like God has a plan for everybody, and even though you might not be able to see it right in the moment when things are really tough, maybe in like 5 years down the road, once you get through it, you'll see, oh, okay, that had to happen so that I could be here today.
Beautiful, beautifully said. Thank you so much. We don't have any more questions, so I guess this is where we'll end our session. If anybody does come up with any questions or you're too shy to ask them now, feel free to let your teacher know. We're more than happy to get those questions answered via email. Thank you very much, Kendra, for sharing what an
You.
incredible, heroic, and just story of resilience that I am sure everybody leaves very inspired here today.
Thank you
So
for
thank
having
you.
me. Thank
It
you.
was
Thank
our
you.
pleasure. Thank you again, and we hope to welcome everyone in the future to the museum. And um, until then, have a lovely rest of your day. Thank you very much. Bye, everyone.
Take care.
You
Bye.
too. Bye.